The coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, but Joshua Turner kept his hands wrapped around the ceramic mug anyway. It was one of those September mornings in Portland where the mist refused to burn off, clinging to the windows of the small diner like something that didn't want to be forgotten. The mug itself was chipped at the rim. He always chose that one, the imperfect one that other customers avoided. His daughter Maya had once told him it made him predictable. She'd been 12 then, wise beyond her years in that way children of single parents often become. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Now she was 16, and predictable was the least of his problems. Refill. The waitress, Carol, didn't wait for an answer. She never did. She'd been working the morning shift at Maggie's Corner Diner for 11 years, 3 years longer than Joshua had been coming here. The stream of dark liquid filled his cup with that specific sound, part gurgle, part comfort, that had become the soundtrack to his morning ritual. Thanks, Carol. Joshua's voice carried the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. Not the exhaustion of late nights, but the deeper kind that came from carrying weight you couldn't set down. He was 38 years old, with the sort of face that photographs poorly but lived well, strong jaw, eyes the color of turned earth, and premature gray threading through dark brown hair at his temples. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, jeans with honest wear at the knees, and work boots that had seen more than their share of construction sites. Through the window he watched the street wake up. Powell's Books across the way wouldn't open for another hour. A homeless man Joshua recognized. Everyone called him Prophet, though no one knew his real name, was folding up his cardboard shelter with methodical precision, each movement practiced from years of repetition. Joshua had bought him breakfast 4 times this month. Prophet never asked for it, but he always accepted with a nod that communicated more than words. The bell above the diner door chimed. Joshua didn't look up immediately. He was used to the rhythm of morning customers. The construction workers ordering to go, the early shift nurses grabbing something quick, the insomniacs finally surrendering to the day. But something in the quality of silence that followed made him glance toward the entrance. The man who walked in didn't belong. That was the first thought, sharp and immediate. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Joshua's truck, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that caught the light. His shoes were leather, polished to a mirror shine despite the wet Portland streets. He was maybe 50, with silver hair cut with the precision that suggested regular appointments at establishments that didn't call themselves barbershops. His face had the kind of tired that came from different sources than Joshua's. Guilt, maybe, or the weight of decisions that affected more lives than just your own. But it was his eyes that stopped Joshua mid-sip. They were searching, desperate even, scanning the diner like a man looking for something he'd lost and had no map to find. The stranger's gaze landed on Joshua and held. For a moment, just a flash, something flickered across the man's face. Recognition? No, that wasn't quite right. More like hope, or perhaps the thing that comes right before resignation. Carol approached him with a menu, but the man waved it away gently. Just coffee, please. Black. His voice was cultured, the kind that suggested private schools and careful diction. And, could you tell me, is that seat taken? He gestured toward the booth where Joshua sat. Carol glanced at Joshua, one eyebrow raised in a question she didn't voice. Joshua shrugged. It's a free country. The phrase came out more bitter than he intended. But he didn't take it back. The stranger slid into the opposite side of the booth with visible relief, as if those few steps from the door had required tremendous effort. Up close, Joshua could see the signs he'd learned to recognize from years of working construction sites alongside men running from their lives. The slight tremor in the hands, the too careful way of moving that suggested someone trying to hold themselves together, the eyes that looked everywhere except directly at you. Thank you, the stranger said. His coffee arrived, and he wrapped both hands around it just like Joshua had, seeking warmth or maybe just something solid to hold. I know this is unusual. A stranger imposing. But I've been driving around the city for 3 hours, and when I saw you through the window, He trailed off, took a breath. You're going to think I'm insane. Probably, Joshua agreed. He should have felt annoyed or wary, but something in the man's raw vulnerability diffused that instinct. But I've been called worse. A ghost of a smile touched the stranger's lips. Alexander Beaumont. He extended a hand across the table. Joshua stared at the hand for a long moment. The name meant something, he couldn't place it exactly, but it carried weight, the kind that came from newspaper business sections or late-night news broadcasts. He took the hand anyway. The grip was firm but not aggressive, and Joshua felt calluses there he hadn't expected. This man, despite the suit and the shine, knew something about physical work. Joshua Turner. I know. Alexander pulled his hand back, wrapping it again around his coffee mug. I mean, I don't know you specifically, but I saw you feeding that homeless man last week. Through the window. I was parked across the street, having what I can only describe as a complete crisis of everything. And I watched you buy him breakfast, sit with him for 20 minutes, treat him like he mattered. You never pulled out your phone to photograph it. You didn't tell anyone. You just did it. Joshua felt something twist in his chest. Prophet's a good man. He doesn't talk much, but he listens. Sometimes that's enough. See, that's exactly what I mean. Alexander's voice cracked slightly. You don't even know how rare that is. How rare you are. He laughed, but it came out jagged. God, I sound like a lunatic. You should probably ask me to leave. Should I? Joshua studied the man across from him. Every instinct built from years of single parenting, of protecting Maya from a world that could be cruel, told him to be careful. But underneath that protective layer ran something deeper, the same thing that made him choose the chipped mug, that made him sit with Prophet, that made him volunteer at the community center every Saturday despite being exhausted. It was the bone-deep knowledge that people were complicated, that judgment was easy, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was just witness someone else's pain without turning away. I've done something terrible, Alexander said quietly. The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Multiple terrible things, actually, and I've spent the last 3 months trying to figure out how to live with that. How to be a person who can look in the mirror. And I keep failing. He looked up, and Joshua saw his eyes were glassy with unshed tears. My therapist says I need to find someone I can talk to without judgment. Someone who doesn't know me, doesn't have expectations. She suggested a support group, but he shook his head. I can't do that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But when I saw you through this window, I thought, maybe, just maybe. Carol appeared with a pot of coffee, topping off both their mugs. She'd worked here long enough to read situations, to know when to hover and when to vanish. She vanished. Joshua took a long drink, letting the bitter heat ground him. Outside, the city was waking up properly now. A young mother pushed a stroller past, talking animatedly on her phone. A cyclist weaved through traffic, messenger bag bouncing against their back. Prophet had disappeared around a corner, heading toward whatever constituted his day. Why me? Joshua finally asked. You don't know me. I could be anyone. That's exactly why, Alexander said. Because you could be anyone, but you're not. You're someone who sees a person everyone else walks past and you stop. You sit. You witness. He paused. I need someone to witness what I've done, to hear it, and I need them not to forgive me or condemn me or try to fix it. I just need them to hear it and let me carry it. Joshua thought about Maya, about the conversation they'd had last night at dinner. She'd been talking about her English class, about a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye, The Art of Disappearing, about how being present for another person was sometimes the hardest and most important thing you could do. She'd looked at him with those eyes that were too much like her mother's and said, You're good at that, Dad, at being there without making it about you. He'd deflected, made some joke about how he was just good at shutting up. But she'd been serious, and he'd known she was trying to tell him something, to let him know she saw him even when he felt invisible. I'm not a priest, Joshua said carefully. I can't give you absolution. I'm not asking for that. Alexander's shoulders sagged slightly. I'm asking for an hour of your time, maybe less. Just someone to hear it who won't immediately call the police or the press or my board of directors. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn photograph, sliding it across the table. This is why. Joshua looked down at the image. It showed a young woman, maybe early 20s, with dark curly hair and a smile that lit up her whole face. She was holding a diploma, cap askew, joy radiating from every pixel. "My daughter, Sophie," Alexander said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She died 6 months ago. Drunk driver. She was driving home from her first day at her new job. Pediatric nurse. She'd just finished her training. She'd called me 20 minutes before. I was in a meeting, an important meeting. I sent her to voicemail." He stopped, swallowed hard. "The things I've done, the things I need to talk about, they all connect back to that moment. To realizing I'd spent her entire life putting meetings first. Putting money first. Putting my own ambition first. And now she's gone and I can't." His voice broke completely. Joshua felt his throat tighten. He knew loss. Maya's mother, Rebecca, had died when Maya was 6. Cancer, quick and brutal despite every treatment, every prayer, every desperate bargain Joshua had tried to make with a universe that didn't bargain. He knew what it was to carry that weight, to wake up at 3 in the morning and feel the absence like a physical wound. He slid the photograph back across the table gently. "I'm sorry about your daughter." Alexander nodded, wiping his eyes roughly with the heel of his hand. "Thank you." He took a shaky breath. "So, will you listen? Just for an hour. No judgment, no advice. Just witness." Joshua looked at his watch. He had a shift at the hardware store starting at 10. He worked there 3 days a week, supplementing his income from the community center where he served as the youth program coordinator. He had 45 minutes. It wasn't enough time for whatever this was, but maybe it didn't need to be. Maybe this man just needed to know someone would show up. 1 hour, Joshua said. But not here. Carol doesn't need to hear whatever this is, and this place deserves to stay what it is. A good place. He stood, dropping a 20 on the table. More than enough to cover both their coffees and a generous tip. "There's a park 3 blocks from here. Waterfront Park. We can walk and talk." Alexander stood too, relief flooding his features so completely that he looked 10 years younger for a moment. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "Maybe I do," Joshua said quietly. "Maybe that's why I'm saying yes." They walked out together into the Portland morning, the mist finally beginning to lift, revealing a sky that promised rain later but held, for now, in uncertain balance. Joshua didn't know it yet, but this conversation would change everything. Not in the dramatic, sudden way of movies, but in the slow, inexorable way that water shapes stone. One moment, one choice, one witnessing at a time. Behind them, through the window, Carol watched them go and shook her head, smiling slightly. She'd seen Joshua Turner do this before. Extend his hand to the lost, the broken, the people everyone else had given up on. She didn't know where he found the strength for it, but she knew it was real. And she knew, somehow, that this time was different. This time, the person Joshua was helping might be the one who ended up saving him. The path along the waterfront park ran parallel to the Willamette River, which moved with its usual quiet determination toward the Columbia. Morning joggers passed them in both directions, earbuds in, lost in their private rhythms. The air smelled of river water, damp earth, and the specific scent of Portland autumn, decaying leaves mixed with the ever-present hint of coffee from the nearby roasteries. Joshua walked with his hands in his pockets, his stride measured and unhurried. Alexander kept pace beside him, clutching a briefcase Joshua hadn't noticed him carrying from the diner. For the first few minutes, neither spoke. Joshua had learned this from years of working with teenagers at the community center. Sometimes people needed permission to be silent before they could find their words. "I don't know where to start," Alexander finally said. "Start with this morning," Joshua suggested. "What made you get in your car and drive around for 3 hours?" Alexander's laugh was hollow. "I couldn't sleep. Again. I haven't slept properly since Sophie died, but last night was worse. I kept thinking about this board meeting we have next week. Beaumont Industries, my company, we're about to finalize a merger that will make us one of the largest pharmaceutical distributors in the Pacific Northwest. 15 years of work culminating in this one moment. He paused at a bench overlooking the river, and they both sat. And all I can think about is how none of it matters. How I built this empire and for what? My daughter is dead. My wife left me 3 months ago. Couldn't stand to look at me anymore. Couldn't stand that I was still going to the office, still making deals while our daughter's room sat empty. And she was right to leave. I would have left me too. Joshua watched a duck paddle near the shore, its movements creating perfect expanding circles on the water's surface. What does this have to do with the terrible things you mentioned? Alexander opened his briefcase. Inside were folders, dozens of them, each labeled with dates going back years. He pulled out one from the top. This is from 8 months ago, before Sophie died. We were negotiating a contract with a smaller pharmaceutical company. Generic medication distributor. Family-owned. Been in business for 30 years. Good people. They had a patent on an affordable insulin variant that was helping thousands of low-income diabetics. He opened the folder, showing Joshua pages of legal documents. I buried them, not because we needed to, we were already profitable, but because I could. Because in the pharmaceutical world, monopoly means profit, and I told myself that's just business. I used every legal weapon we had. Frivolous lawsuits, undercutting their prices until they couldn't compete, lobbying to change regulations that protected small distributors. Took me 6 months, but I destroyed them. They declared bankruptcy in December. Joshua felt something cold settle in his stomach. How many people lost access to their medication? Approximately 12,000 patients in Oregon and Washington. Alexander's voice was flat now, reciting facts like a prosecutor reading charges. Our version costs 3 times as much. Some people can't afford it anymore. I've tracked down the numbers, rough estimates from hospital emergency rooms, diabetic ketoacidosis cases, complications. At least 47 people have died or been seriously hospitalized because they couldn't afford the increased cost. He looked at Joshua directly now. 47 people. Because I wanted a bigger market share. The silence that followed was heavy. Somewhere downstream, a barge horn sounded, low and mournful. I didn't kill them with my own hands, Alexander continued. That's what I told myself for months. It's just business. It's legal. Everyone does it. All the excuses that let men like me sleep at night. He closed the folder carefully. And then Sophie died, and I was sitting in her apartment, going through her things, and I found a journal. She wrote about her patients. About this one little girl, 7 years old, diabetic. Sophie had spent hours teaching her parents how to manage her care, how to afford the medication. She wrote, Lily's mom cried today because their insulin costs have tripled. I don't understand how we live in a country where life-saving medicine is a luxury. Dad could fix this. He has the power. But I'm afraid to ask because I know what he'll say. It's just business. Alexander's hands shook as he placed the folder back in the briefcase. She knew. She knew what I was, and she was ashamed of me, and she died thinking I would never change, that I would never choose people over profit. Joshua absorbed this slowly. His first instinct was exactly what Alexander had feared: judgment, anger, the urge to stand up and walk away from this man who had caused so much harm in the name of profit. But he forced himself to sit with the feeling, to let it exist without acting on it. He thought about Maya, about the philosophy she'd been learning in her ethics class, about how easy it was to condemn, how much harder it was to understand. What happened to the family who owned the company you destroyed? Joshua asked. The Chens. Robert and Linda, second-generation immigrants. Their son Daniel ran operations. Alexander pulled out another folder. Robert had a heart attack from the stress in January. He survived, but he'll never fully recover. Linda is working as a pharmacy tech now, at 63 years old, trying to keep their house. Daniel. He paused. Daniel started a GoFundMe to try to pay for their legal debts. Last I checked, they'd raised $8,000. They owe $1.2 million. Joshua stood up, needing to move. He walked closer to the river's edge, watching the current. Behind him, he heard Alexander stand too, but the older man kept his distance, giving Joshua space to process. Why are you telling me this? Joshua asked without turning around. What do you want from me? I don't know, Alexander admitted. Maybe I want you to tell me I'm a monster. Maybe I want you to tell me there's a way back from this. Maybe I just need someone to know the truth and not immediately try to profit from it or use it against me or tell me it's not that bad. He moved to stand beside Joshua, both of them now facing the water. Everyone in my world, they either want something from me or they want to destroy me. No one just wants to see me, to witness what I've become and let me sit with that. Joshua thought about his own life, about the choices he'd made over the past 10 years since Rebecca died. He'd had offers, good offers, to take positions at larger organizations, places where he could have made more money, given Maya more opportunities. But he'd stayed at the community center, stayed in their small 2-bedroom apartment in southeast Portland, stayed in the life that felt manageable and real. He'd chosen proximity to struggle over distance from it. He'd chosen to know the names of the kids who came through his programs, to attend their graduations, to show up when they needed someone. He'd always told himself it was enough. That small-scale goodness counted. But standing here, hearing about the ripple effects of one man's choices, he wondered if he'd been lying to himself. Maybe staying small was its own kind of cowardice. I'm not going to tell you you're a monster, Joshua said finally. I'm also not going to tell you it's okay. 47 people. The Chun family. Those are real consequences. I know. But I'm also not going to pretend I understand what it's like to have the kind of power you have. To make decisions that affect thousands of people. Joshua picked up a smooth river stone and turned it over in his hand. I make breakfast for my daughter. I help kids learn how to code and apply for scholarships. I fixed the broken screen door on Mrs. Patterson's house because she's 86 and on a fixed income. That's the scale of my choices. I don't get to play God with people's lives. Maybe that makes you the lucky one, Alexander said quietly. Maybe. Joshua threw the stone into the river, watching it skip twice before sinking. Or maybe it just makes me less tested. It's easy to be good when the stakes are low. They stood in silence for a moment, and then Alexander spoke again, his voice stronger now. After Sophie died, after I read her journal, I started trying to fix it. I set up an anonymous fund to subsidize insulin costs, $3 million. I hired investigators to track down everyone affected by the price increase. I've been paying their bills, covering their medication, all anonymously. I thought it would make me feel better. It doesn't. Because money doesn't fix what's broken, Joshua said. No, Alexander agreed. It doesn't. I also tracked down the Chens. I've been trying to figure out how to help them without it looking like guilt money or a bribe. Their legal team warned them not to accept anything from me. They think I'm trying to prevent a lawsuit. Are they suing you? They should. They probably will. And they'll lose because I have better lawyers and unlimited resources. Alexander's voice turned bitter. That's what power is, isn't it? Not being able to lose even when you should. Joshua turned to face him fully. So what do you want? Really? Not from me. From your life. Going forward. Alexander met his gaze. I want to be someone my daughter would have been proud of. I want to wake up and not hate myself. I want to figure out how to use the power I have for something other than accumulation and destruction. He gestured helplessly. But I don't know how. Every instinct I have, every training, every success I've ever had, it's all built on the idea that business is war and winning is everything. I don't know how to be a different person. Then maybe you need to learn, Joshua said simply. From the ground up. Not a grand gesture or a major donation or a press release about how you found redemption. Just daily choices. Small scale. Human scale. Like feeding a homeless man breakfast. Like treating people like they matter. Joshua checked his watch. They'd been walking and talking for 30 minutes. I need to get to work soon, but I'll make you a deal. You want someone to witness what you're doing, to keep you accountable without judgment? Fine. But you have to do the work. Real work. Not just writing checks. Alexander straightened slightly, something like hope flickering in his expression. What kind of work? Come to the community center. We're always short on volunteers. You can help with the after-school program, teach a class, mentor kids. Whatever you're good at that doesn't involve corporate mergers. Joshua pulled out his phone. What are your actual skills? Beyond business. Alexander thought for a moment. I used to build things. Before I went to business school, I was studying engineering. I liked working with my hands, solving problems. I haven't done it in 30 years. We have a makerspace. 3D printers, basic woodworking tools, electronics. It's always breaking down and we can never afford proper maintenance. Think you could handle that? Yes, I could do that. Joshua typed something into his phone and then showed Alexander the screen, the community center's address and hours. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 5 to 8. Saturday mornings, 9 to noon. Show up in clothes you don't mind getting dirty. Don't tell anyone who you are. Just be Alex, the guy who fixes things. He paused. And you keep talking to me. Once a week. We meet here or at the diner, and you tell me what you're struggling with. I'll listen. I won't fix it for you, but I'll witness it. That's the deal. Alexander stared at the phone screen, then back at Joshua. Why would you do this? You have every reason to hate me. I don't hate you, Joshua said honestly. I don't know you well enough to hate you, but I know grief. I know what it's like to realize you've been living wrong and to want to change. And I know that change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in community, with people who see you and don't let you run away from yourself. He held out his hand. So, deal? Alexander took his hand, and this time the grip was different. Less desperation, more determination. Deal. Thank you, Joshua. I mean it. Thank you when you've shown up for 6 months, Joshua said, but he smiled slightly. Talk is easy. Action is what counts. They walked back toward the parking area where Joshua's truck was parked. A 2008 Ford F-150 with more rust than paint in places, but it ran well enough. Alexander's car, by contrast, was a sleek black Tesla, the kind that whispered money even when parked. One more thing, Joshua said as they reached the vehicles. The Chens, the family you bankrupted. I want you to meet them, not to apologize or offer them money, just to meet them, to see them as people, to understand the full weight of what your choices cost. Alexander went pale. I don't think they'd want to see me. Probably not. But part of accountability is facing the people you've harmed. Not for your comfort, for theirs. They deserve to tell you what your actions did to them. They deserve to see you hear it. Joshua opened his truck door. Think about it. If you're serious about change, that's part of it. He climbed into his truck and started the engine, which coughed twice before catching. Through the windshield, he watched Alexander stand there in the parking lot, briefcase in hand, looking lost and small despite his expensive suit. Joshua had no idea if this would work. He had no idea if people like Alexander Beaumont could truly change, or if this was just another rich man's crisis that would fade as soon as life got comfortable again. But he'd learned something from years of working with troubled teenagers, with people in recovery, with anyone trying to become something other than their worst choices. You don't refuse to witness someone struggle just because they might fail. You show up. You hold space. You let them do the hard work while standing as proof that someone believes it's possible. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove toward the hardware store, leaving Alexander behind. But he had a feeling, strong and strange, that this wasn't the end of anything. It was barely the beginning. The rest of Joshua's day passed in the familiar rhythm of routine. At Morrison's Hardware, he worked the morning shift, helping customers find the right grade of sandpaper, explaining the difference between deck screws and drywall screws, cutting keys, mixing paint. It was work that engaged his hands and left his mind free to wander, which today meant circling back again and again to Alexander Beaumont. During his lunch break, he sat in his truck and called Maya. Dad? Aren't you working? Her voice came through bright and slightly breathless. She was probably between classes, rushing to her next one. Just checking in. How was the calculus test? Brutal but fair. Mrs. Henderson's tests are always brutal but fair. He heard her laugh. Is everything okay? You sound weird. Do I sound weird? You have your something happened but I'm processing it voice. Spill. Joshua smiled despite himself. She was too perceptive, always had been. Just had an interesting morning. Met someone who needed help. The billionaire. Maya said with theatrical excitement. Did you save his soul? How do you? Joshua stopped. Wait, what? Dad. A mystery billionaire walks into Maggie's diner and sits down with you. Carol texted me like 10 minutes after you left. The whole breakfast club is texting about it. Apparently he drove a Tesla that costs more than our apartment. Joshua closed his eyes. Of course. In a neighborhood like theirs, where everyone knew everyone, privacy was a polite fiction. It's not that dramatic. Aha. So who is he? What did he want? Are we rich now? Can I finally get a car that doesn't smell like the 1990s? My truck runs fine, Joshua said automatically. And no, we're not rich. He just needed someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't involved in his life. Maya was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, the teasing tone was gone. Was he okay? Like, really okay? I don't know yet, Joshua admitted, but I'm going to try to help him figure that out. Of course you are. Her voice was fond now. That's what you do. You're the guy people find when they need finding. That's not, Dad. It's literally your entire personality. The community center kids. Prophet. Mrs. Patterson. That teenager last year who was sleeping in his car. You let him stay in our living room for 3 weeks. You're a magnet for lost people. Maybe I just can't say no. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Maya said softly. Maybe the world needs people who can't say no when someone needs help. She paused. Just don't forget you're a person too. With limits. With your own needs. Joshua felt his throat tighten. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. Gotta go, calculus waits for no one. Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. He sat in his truck after she hung up, staring at the hardware store's brick facade. Maya was right, he was a magnet for lost people. But what she didn't know, what he could barely admit to himself, was that it wasn't altruism driving him. It was something more complicated, more selfish. When he helped others, when he witnessed their struggles and stayed present through their pain, he felt less alone in his own. He felt part of something larger than his small life, his small choices, his small sphere of influence. Rebecca had understood that about him. In those final weeks, when the hospice bed had taken up most of their bedroom and the smell of approaching death had hung in the air like a presence of its own, she'd held his hand and said, "Promise me something. Don't let my death make you smaller. Don't use it as an excuse to hide. You have this gift, Josh, you see people. Really see them. The world needs that. Maya will need that. Don't waste it." He'd promised. And he'd kept that promise, mostly. But there were nights when Maya was at a friend's house and the apartment was too quiet, when he wondered if what Rebecca had called a gift was actually just an inability to sit with his own emptiness. If helping others was just another way of running from himself. The hardware store shift ended at 3. Joshua drove home to the apartment. Second floor of a converted house in the J District, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors that creaked in winter, windows that stuck in summer, and rent that was somehow still manageable despite Portland's skyrocketing costs. He had 90 minutes before Maya got home from her after-school robotics club. He spent it the way he always did. Laundry in the basement, dishes from that morning's rushed breakfast, checking the pantry and making a mental grocery list. The mundane architecture of life. His therapist, yes, he had one, had needed one after Rebecca died and kept going because it helped, had once asked him if he found these routines comforting or constraining. Both, he'd answered. They're the bones that hold everything else up. Without them, I'd just be a mess of feelings with nowhere to put them. At 4:30, Maya burst through the door with her usual hurricane energy. Backpack slung over one shoulder, robotics team jacket unzipped despite the autumn chill. "We won," she announced, dumping her stuff on the couch. "The mock competition. Our robot completed the course in under 2 minutes. Mr. Hendricks says if we keep this up, we might actually place at state." "That's fantastic." Joshua pulled her into a hug, which she tolerated for exactly 3 seconds before squirming away. "Also, I need new parts. The servo motor is making a weird noise, and if it dies during actual competition, we're screwed." "How much?" $40. "But I've been saving. I can cover half." Joshua did the math automatically in his head. Payday was Friday. Between now and then, they had $73 in discretionary funds. $20 for Maya's servo motor. $40 for groceries. That left $13 for gas and incidentals. Tight but workable. Deal, he said. 20 from you, 20 from me. We'll order it tonight. Maya grinned. You're the best. Also, what's for dinner? I'm starving. They made tacos together. A Tuesday tradition that had started when Maya was 8 and had insisted she was old enough to use the knife for dicing tomatoes. Now she was faster at it than Joshua, her hands quick and sure, talking the whole time about her day, the drama in her friend group, the upcoming homecoming dance she had no interest in attending, the college application essay she was dreading writing. Ms. Rodriguez says I should write about losing Mom, Maya said, focused on mincing cilantro. She says it shows resilience or whatever, but I don't want to. Is that weird? Not weird, Joshua said carefully, browning ground beef in a cast-iron skillet. Your grief isn't a college application commodity. You can write about it if it feels right, but you don't owe anyone that story. Thank you. Maya looked up, relieved. That's what I thought, but everyone keeps saying it's good material. Like my trauma is just material. People mean well, Joshua said, but they're wrong. Write about robotics. Write about your volunteer work at the animal shelter. Write about anything that feels true to who you are now, not who you were when the worst thing happened. They ate at the small kitchen table, legs bumping in the cramped space, and Joshua felt the familiar gratitude that came with these moments. This was his real life. Not the dramatic morning with Alexander Beaumont, not the big feelings and complicated morality. This, tacos with his daughter, helping her order robot parts, listening to her figure out who she was becoming. Later, after Maya had retreated to her room for homework, Joshua sat on the couch with his laptop and did something he hadn't planned to do. He Googled Alexander Beaumont. The results were extensive. CEO of Beaumont Industries, estimated net worth of $847 million. Multiple articles about his business acumen, his strategic acquisitions, his reputation as a tough negotiator. A profile from 3 years ago in Forbes titled, The Man Who Sees Patterns, How Alexander Beaumont Built a Pharmaceutical Empire. And then, more recently, the personal tragedy. Obituary for Sophie Marie Beaumont, age 24. Articles about the drunk driver who'd killed her. A college student named Marcus Reed, blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit, now serving 8 years for vehicular manslaughter. But what caught Joshua's attention was an article from 2 months ago in the Portland Business Journal. Beaumont Industries under fire for aggressive market tactics. It detailed exactly what Alexander had described, the destruction of Chun family pharmaceuticals, the resulting price increases, the community outrage. There were quotes from Linda Chun, talking about her husband's heart attack, about the stress of losing everything they'd built. There was a quote from a patient's advocacy group, estimating the health impact of reduced insulin access. And there, buried near the end of the article, was a quote from Alexander himself. Business requires difficult decisions. Chun Family Pharmaceuticals was not viable in the current market landscape. These consolidations, while painful, ultimately serve the greater efficiency of the healthcare system. Reading those words, Joshua felt something harden in his chest. This was the man he'd sat with this morning? The man who'd cried about his daughter? The same person who could say not viable and greater efficiency about people's lives? But then he thought about Alexander's hands shaking as he'd shown Joshua those folders. About the raw desperation in his voice. About the fact that he'd sought out a stranger specifically to say, I have done terrible things and I don't know how to live with that. People were complicated. They contained multitudes. The man who destroyed the Chens was also the man who'd set up a $3 million anonymous fund to help his victims. The man who said callous things to journalists was also the man who'd spent 3 hours driving around Portland, looking for someone who might witness his breakdown without judgment. Joshua didn't have to forgive him. He didn't even have to like him. But he could choose to believe that change was possible, that people could learn to be better than their worst choices. Wasn't that what he told the kids at the community center? That your past didn't define your future? That you could choose every day to be different? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Alexander Beaumont. I got your number from the community center website. I hope that's not overstepping. I wanted to say thank you again for this morning, and to let you know I'll be there Thursday evening. 5 p.m. I won't let you down. Joshua stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "Don't thank me yet. Show up first. Then keep showing up." The reply came quickly, "I will." Joshua set his phone down and looked around his small living room, the couch that was more comfortable than it looked, the bookshelf overflowing with Maya's required reading and his own collection of philosophy and history, the photos on the wall documenting Maya's progression from gap-toothed child to the fierce, funny teenager she was now. This was his life. Small, maybe, by some measures, but full, real, grounded in daily choices and presence and love. He didn't know if Alexander Beaumont could fit into a life like this. He didn't know if a man accustomed to empire could learn the vocabulary of community. But maybe that wasn't his job to figure out. Maybe his job was just to show up, to witness, to hold space, to be the kind of person who treated people like they mattered, even when they'd spent years proving they didn't. Outside, rain had started to fall, finally making good on the morning's promise. Joshua listened to it hit the window, steady and persistent, the kind of rain that would last all night. In her room, Maya was listening to music, probably while doing her homework. The radiator clanked to life, filling the apartment with its particular metallic song. This was enough, Joshua thought. This life, these choices, this small sphere of influence. But maybe, just maybe, it could also include helping one lost billionaire find his way back to being human. Not because Joshua was a saint, not because he had all the answers, but because someone had to be willing to witness. Someone had to be willing to say, "I see you, all of you, the good and the terrible, and I'm not running away." That was the gift Rebecca had seen in him. That was what Maya was learning to see too. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. Thursday arrived draped in typical Portland October weather. Gray skies threatening rain but withholding it, as if the clouds themselves were undecided. Joshua spent the morning at Morrison's Hardware, the afternoon catching up on paperwork for the community center's grant applications, and by 4:45 he was unlocking the makerspace, flipping on lights, and wondering if Alexander Beaumont would actually show up. The Jade District Community Center occupied a converted warehouse on Southeast 82nd Avenue. The building had been many things over its 90-year life. A cannery, a furniture factory, an illegal rave venue in the early 2000s, and finally, through the determined fundraising of local residents, a community hub. Joshua had been the youth program coordinator for 7 years. He knew every inch of this building, every quirk and broken corner, every story embedded in its walls. The makerspace was his particular domain, a large room with concrete floors, industrial lighting, and workbenches covered in projects in various states of completion. Against one wall stood the 3D printers, 3 of them, though only 2 worked reliably. The third, an older model donated by a tech company, made an ominous grinding noise and frequently jammed. Against another wall, hand tools, soldering stations, a vintage drill press, and a computer setup for CAD design. In the center, long tables where kids worked on everything from robotics projects to art installations to practical fixes for things broken in their own homes. At 5:03, the door opened and Alexander Beaumont walked in. Joshua barely recognized him. Gone was the expensive suit, replaced by jeans that looked new but not designer, work boots that had clearly been purchased recently, and a plain gray t-shirt under a canvas jacket. His silver hair was less perfectly styled, and he carried himself differently, less corporate authority, more tentative uncertainty. "You came," Joshua said, not quite hiding his surprise. "I said I would." Alexander looked around the space with genuine interest. "This is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something more institutional? This feels alive. Messy in a good way." He approached the nearest workbench, where a partially assembled robot arm sat surrounded by tools and circuit boards. "May I?" "Carefully. That's Jamal's project. He's been working on it for 3 months. It's for a regional engineering competition." Alexander examined the work with the kind of focus Joshua recognized from his own time spent in maker spaces and workshops. The servo integration is clever. Is this for gripping or for precision pointing? Gripping. He's designing it to help his grandmother pick up items. She has severe arthritis. Something shifted in Alexander's expression. That's beautiful. Using engineering to solve a personal human problem. Not for profit, not for scale. Just to help someone he loves. He looked at Joshua. I forgot that was possible. That making things could be about that. Before Joshua could respond, the door banged open and teenagers began flooding in. The Thursday regulars, ranging from 13 to 18, carrying backpacks and energy drinks and the specific combination of exhaustion and excitement that came from surviving another day of high school. Mr. Turner, a girl with purple hair and multiple facial piercings, bounded over. The laser cutter is making that noise again. The bad noise. And we really need it for the podcast studio panels. Mika, this is Alex. He's volunteering to help with equipment maintenance. Alex, this is Mika. She's building a sound-isolated podcast studio in the corner. Mika looked Alexander up and down with the frank assessment only teenagers can manage. You know anything about laser cutters? I know a fair amount about mechanical systems and basic electronics, Alexander said carefully. Show me the problem? For the next 2 hours, Joshua watched Alexander Beaumont, billionaire CEO, pharmaceutical empire builder, man who'd destroyed a family business without blinking, get his hands dirty troubleshooting a temperamental laser cutter while Mika explained her podcast concept. The podcast, she told him with the passionate intensity of the young and idealistic, would focus on stories of displaced community members, people pushed out of Portland by rising rents and gentrification. Everyone talks about the housing crisis like it's just numbers, Mika said, holding a flashlight while Alexander examined the laser cutter's cooling system. But it's people. It's my friend's grandparents who owned their house for 40 years and now can't afford the property taxes. It's families who've lived here for generations, getting pushed out. Someone needs to tell those stories. That's important work, Alexander said, and Joshua could hear that he meant it. Documentation matters. Bearing witness to injustice, that's the first step toward change. Mika grinned. Exactly. Mr. Turner says the same thing. He's always talking about how showing up is the most radical thing you can do. Alexander glanced at Joshua across the room, something unreadable in his expression. Joshua was helping Jamal troubleshoot code for his robot arm, but he'd been monitoring the exchange. He gave a slight nod, keep going, and turned back to Jamal's screen. By 6:30, the laser cutter was running smoothly again. Alexander had also fixed the temperamental 3D printer, reorganized the tool wall so equipment was easier to find, and helped a shy 14-year-old named Marcus figure out why his Arduino circuit kept shorting. He moved through the space with growing confidence, and Joshua noticed the transformation happening in real time. This wasn't the corporate Alexander, making strategic decisions from boardrooms. This was someone remembering how to be useful in immediate, tangible ways. At 7:45, the teenagers started packing up. They left in their usual chaos. Backpacks forgotten and retrieved, plans shouted across the room for weekend hangouts, promises to finish projects by next week. Mika stopped by where Alexander was cleaning up the tool bench. Thanks for the help, Alex. You should come back. We always need people who actually know how things work instead of just telling us to Google it. After they left, the space felt larger and quieter. Joshua locked the main door and returned to find Alexander sitting on one of the workbenches, looking exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. That was harder than negotiating a multi-million-dollar merger, Alexander said, but he was smiling slightly. Different muscles, Joshua agreed. He hopped up onto the bench beside Alexander, their legs dangling. You did good work tonight. I fixed a laser cutter, helped a kid with basic Arduino programming. It's not exactly changing the world, isn't it? Joshua gestured around the space. Mika's podcast might actually change how people think about displacement. Marcus is going to use that Arduino knowledge. He wants to study electrical engineering, help his community access affordable solar power. Jamal's grandmother will be able to pick up her medication bottle without pain. He paused. Small scale isn't the same as small impact. Alexander was quiet for a moment. Sophie would have liked this place. She talked about wanting to work with underserved communities, combining medicine with advocacy. I always told her to focus on her career first, that she could do that kind of work later once she was established. His voice cracked slightly. There wasn't supposed to be a later. There was just supposed to be now, and I taught her to postpone now. Joshua let the silence hold, not rushing to fill it with platitudes. I'm angry, Alexander continued, surprising Joshua with the rawness of it. All the time, underneath everything. I'm angry at Marcus Reed for drinking and driving. I'm angry at Sophie for not calling an Uber, even though that's not fair. I'm angry at myself for every priority I got wrong, every meeting I put before her, every time I chose profit over presence. And I'm angry that I have to keep living, keep getting up every morning, keep existing in a world she doesn't get to see. That's grief, Joshua said quietly. That's what it looks like. Anger is just how it shows up sometimes. How did you survive it? Losing your wife. Alexander looked at him directly. How did you not let it destroy everything? Joshua thought back to those first 6 months after Rebecca died. Maya, 7 years old, waking up crying every night. His own hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold a coffee mug without spilling. The way everything that used to matter, work, hobbies, plans, had suddenly felt absurd and trivial. The way he'd wondered, more than once, if it would be easier to just stop fighting, to let the grief pull him under completely. I had Maya, Joshua said. She needed me to get up, to make breakfast, to show her that life continuing was possible even when it felt impossible. And I had people, Carol at the diner, the director here at the center, my brother in Seattle, who wouldn't let me disappear, who kept showing up, kept calling, kept dragging me back into the world when all I wanted was to hide. He looked at Alexander. Grief doesn't get smaller. You get bigger around it. You build a life that can hold it. But you can't do that alone. I am alone, Alexander said flatly. My wife is gone. Sophie is gone. I have business associates, employees, board members, but no one who actually knows me. No one who would notice if I disappeared beyond the operational inconvenience. That's not entirely true anymore, Joshua pointed out. You have Mika, who expects you back next week. You have me, bearing witness to your mess every Thursday. It's not much, but it's more than alone. Alexander laughed, short and bitter. A teenager and a community center coordinator. Against the whole weight of my life. You'd be surprised how much weight 2 people can help carry if they're positioned right. Joshua slid off the workbench. Come on, I'll buy you dinner. There's a Thai place around the corner. Best pad CEW in Portland, and it's cheap. I don't need cheap. But I do, Joshua interrupted gently. And if we're going to keep doing this, you need to understand how most people actually live. So we're going to the cheap Thai place, and we're going to eat like normal people do, and you're going to tell me what else you've been struggling with this week. They walked to Pak Pak, a hole-in-the-wall restaurant that was really just a reconfigured house with outdoor seating under strings of lights. The evening had turned cool, and the other diners were bundled in jackets, eating with the particular focus that comes from good food and not enough money to waste time on other distractions. Over steaming plates of noodles and papaya salad, Alexander told Joshua about the rest of his week. About lying awake at 3 a.m., calculating how much damage he'd done over the years. About going to his therapist and being told he needed to process his guilt in stages, that trying to fix everything at once was its own form of avoidance. About sitting in his downtown penthouse apartment, 1,200 square feet of expensive emptiness, and realizing he had no photographs on display, no mementos, nothing that suggested a human being lived there. I've been living like I'm temporary, Alexander said, pushing noodles around his plate. Like I'm in a hotel. Like nothing is worth making permanent because I might need to relocate for business at any moment. 25 years in Portland, and I don't have a home. I have a residence. So change it, Joshua said. Buy some art that actually means something to you. Put up photos of Sophie. Get a plant even if you kill it. Make the space reflect that a person lives there. That feels trivial. Rearranging furniture while Rome burns. No, Joshua said firmly. It's primal. Humans need nests. We need spaces that reflect us back to ourselves. You can't rebuild your life while living in a place that doesn't acknowledge you have one. Alexander absorbed this, chewing slowly. Around them, the restaurant hummed with conversation in 3 languages. The smell of fish sauce and fresh basil. The clink of silverware and ice water. Real life happening at a volume and pace that had nothing to do with boardrooms or stock prices. "Tell me about the Chens," Joshua said. "Have you thought more about meeting them?" Alexander's expression clouded. "I thought about it. I even drove past their house yesterday. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to work up the courage to knock on their door. But what would I even say? Sorry I destroyed your life's work for profit? It's grotesque." "It is grotesque," Joshua agreed. "But pretending it didn't happen is worse. They deserve to tell you what you did to them. Not for your redemption, for their chance to be heard by the person who caused their pain. What if they hate me? What if they should? They probably will hate you. They probably should." Joshua met his eyes. "That's not the point. The point is showing up anyway, facing what you've done. Not hiding behind lawyers and anonymity and the distance power provides." Alexander set down his fork. "Will you come with me? When I go. Not to speak for me or protect me. Just to be there. As a witness." Joshua considered this. It was one thing to meet Alexander for coffee, to let him volunteer at the center. It was another to insert himself directly into the messy confrontation between perpetrator and victim. Could go wrong in a dozen ways. Could make things worse. But he thought about Linda Chen's quote in that article about the stress and the heart attack and the humiliation of losing everything. She deserved to say those things to Alexander's face. And maybe having a neutral third party there, someone who wasn't part of Alexander's world or theirs, could provide a kind of container for that conversation. A way to make it possible without it becoming either a legal deposition or an emotional explosion with nowhere to land. "Okay," Joshua said, "but we call first. We ask permission. We don't ambush them. And if they say no, you respect that. This isn't about your need for absolution. It's about their right to confront you on their terms. How do we find their number? You're a billionaire with resources. Figure it out. But do it respectfully." Joshua pulled out his phone and made a note. "Next Tuesday. Diner. You'll tell me if you've made contact and what they said. If they agree to meet, we'll schedule it. If they don't, we'll figure out another way for you to face accountability." They finished dinner and walked back to the community center where both their vehicles were parked. The street was quiet now. Most businesses closed. Only the glow of apartment windows and streetlights pushing back the dark. "Thank you," Alexander said as they reached his Tesla. "For tonight. For all of this. I don't have the words to." "Then don't use words," Joshua interrupted. "Show up. Keep showing up. That's the only thanks that matters." After Alexander drove away, Joshua sat in his truck for a few minutes, processing the evening. His phone buzzed. Maya, asking what time he'd be home. He texted back. 20 minutes, and felt the familiar pull back toward his real life, his primary responsibility, his reason for getting up every morning. But as he started the drive home, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was shifting. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way tectonic plates move, slowly, inexorably, building toward something that would eventually reshape the landscape. The next Tuesday, Joshua arrived at Maggie's diner to find Alexander already there, sitting in their usual booth. But something was different. Alexander's hands were shaking badly enough that his coffee cup rattled against the saucer when he tried to lift it. "What happened?" Joshua slid into the booth, immediately alert. "I found them," Alexander said, his voice tight. "The Chens. I hired a private investigator. I know, that sounds awful, but I needed to do this respectfully and I didn't want to just show up at their house." The investigator found their phone number, confirmed they were home and willing to receive a call. He took a breath. "I called yesterday afternoon," Linda Chen answered. "And?" She listened to who I was. There was this long silence. Then she said, Alexander's voice cracked. She said, "I wondered if you'd ever have the courage to face us. Not with anger, with disappointment, like she'd hoped I was better than I showed myself to be, and I'd confirmed I wasn't. Joshua waited, letting Alexander gather himself. I told her I wanted to meet them, to hear what my actions cost them, to apologize, though I knew an apology was inadequate. She asked why, what I possibly thought I could accomplish. I told her the truth, that I was trying to learn how to be a person who could face what he'd done, that I had no expectations of forgiveness, but that they deserved to tell me to my face what I'd taken from them. What did she say? She said yes. Alexander looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. She said they'd meet me, this Saturday, 11 a.m., at their house. He laughed, but it came out wrong. I'm terrified, Joshua. Absolutely terrified. I've negotiated with hostile board members, faced down regulatory investigators, handled international business crises. But the thought of sitting across from these people and hearing what I did to them, I can barely breathe thinking about it. Good, Joshua said, and Alexander's eyes widened. I mean it. That terror means you understand the gravity, that you're not treating this like another problem to solve. Fear is appropriate here. Will you still come? I know I'm asking a lot. I'll come, Joshua confirmed. But I need to tell you something first. I've been doing research too, about Beaumont Industries, about the pharmaceutical distribution market, about the pattern of acquisitions and market consolidation you've been part of for 15 years. He pulled out his phone and opened a saved article. This piece from ProPublica, published 6 months ago. It documents how pharmaceutical consolidation has led to price increases across hundreds of medications, affecting millions of patients. Your company is specifically named in 14 instances. Alexander went very still. I know. Do you? Because Chun Family Pharmaceuticals wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. A business model built on consolidation and price increases that hurt the most vulnerable people. Joshua's voice was level, but there was steel underneath. If we're doing this, if I'm going to keep showing up as your witness, I need to know you understand the full scope. This isn't just about making amends for one family. It's about confronting a system you helped build and profited from. I know, Alexander repeated, quieter now. After Sophie died, after I started really looking at what I'd built, I commissioned an independent analysis. I hired researchers to track the impact of every acquisition, every price increase, every strategic decision I'd made for profit. The numbers are... He stopped, swallowed hard. The conservative estimate is that my business decisions over the past 10 years have resulted in reduced medication access for approximately 200,000 patients, which translates to measurable health impacts, hospitalizations, complications, deaths. The weight of that number sat between them like a physical presence. So what are you going to do about it? Joshua asked. I don't know, Alexander admitted. The company is public now. I'm CEO, but the board and shareholders have power too. I can't just unilaterally change pricing. But I've been working with a team of lawyers and policy experts, trying to figure out what's possible. Creating access programs, subsidizing costs for low-income patients, lobbying for regulatory changes. But it's slow, bureaucratic. Every meeting generates more meetings. And meanwhile, people are still struggling to afford their medication. Joshua thought about this, about the distance between intention and impact, between wanting to do good and actually doing it. He thought about Mika's podcast idea, about bearing witness to displacement. Maybe that's what Alexander needed, not just personal accountability but public truth-telling. What if you went public with this? Joshua suggested. Not a corporate PR statement. I mean really public. An interview with ProPublica or a similar outlet. Laying out exactly what you're describing, the system, your role in it, the harm caused, what you're trying to do differently. Making yourself vulnerable and accountable to the people who've been harmed. That would destroy my career, Alexander said immediately. The board would force me out. Shareholders would revolt. I'd lose everything I've built. Would that be so bad? Joshua asked bluntly. If everything you've built is causing harm, maybe you should lose it. Maybe that's exactly what accountability looks like. Alexander stared at him, something shifting in his expression. Shock giving way to recognition, giving way to a kind of terrible clarity. You're right. You're absolutely right. I've been trying to have it both ways. Change without consequences, redemption without real loss. But that's not how it works, is it? No, Joshua said. Real change costs something. Usually the thing you're most afraid to lose. They sat with that truth for a long moment. Around them, the diner continued its morning rhythm. Carol refilling coffee, customers ordering breakfast, the cook calling out orders through the kitchen window. Normal life, oblivious to the crisis of conscience happening in the corner booth. Saturday, Alexander finally said. Let me get through Saturday first. Let me face the Chens and hear what they have to say. And then I'll figure out what comes next. What I'm willing to lose to make this right. Joshua nodded. Saturday. I'll pick you up at 10:30. And Alexander, bring tissues. This is going to be hard in ways you can't prepare for. I know. Alexander managed a weak smile. Thanks for not letting me off easy. That's not what this is, Joshua said. I'm not here to make you feel worse. I'm here to keep you from running away from feeling it at all. The rest of the week passed in a strange tension. Joshua went through his usual routines, work at the hardware store, time with Maya, Thursday evening at the community center where Alexander showed up again and spent 3 hours helping kids troubleshoot projects with a focus that suggested he was grateful for the distraction. But underneath everything ran the anticipation of Saturday, the approaching confrontation that Joshua knew would be a watershed moment. Friday night, Maya made spaghetti for dinner. Their traditional Friday meal, complete with garlic bread and the specific way she'd learned to make sauce from Rebecca's recipe. They ate while watching a movie, some superhero thing Maya had been wanting to see, and Joshua tried to be present, to not let his mind wander to tomorrow's meeting. You're worried about something, Maya said during a quiet moment in the movie. She had her mother's ability to read him, to see past his attempted stoicism. Just thinking about tomorrow, Joshua admitted. I'm helping someone with a difficult conversation. The billionaire? His name is Alexander. And yes, Maya muted the TV. Is he a good person? Joshua considered this carefully. I think he's trying to become one. That's maybe the best any of us can say. But he did bad things? Before? Yes, things that hurt people. He's trying to face that now. Maya nodded slowly. That's good, I guess, that he's trying. But the people he hurt, do they have to forgive him? No, Joshua said firmly. They don't owe him anything. Forgiveness isn't required. Sometimes the best you can do is acknowledge the harm, take responsibility, and try to do better going forward. The people you hurt get to decide if that's enough for them. That makes sense. Maya unmuted the TV, but then paused again. Dad, are you safe? Like, is this person dangerous? No, honey, he's not dangerous. Just broken in a way that's taking a long time to fix. Joshua pulled her into a sideways hug. But I appreciate you worrying about me. Someone has to, she said. But she was smiling. You're always worrying about everyone else. They finished the movie, did dishes together, and Maya went to her room to do homework and text with friends. Joshua sat on the couch with his laptop, trying to finish grant reports for the community center but finding his mind wandering. He kept thinking about what Linda Chan had said. According to Alexander, I wondered if you'd ever have the courage to face us. Courage. That's what this was, really. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations. Just the courage to face what you'd done, to sit with the people you'd harmed and let them tell you the truth about impact. It was the kind of courage that didn't make headlines, that wouldn't be celebrated or rewarded. But it was real. Maybe the realest kind. His phone buzzed. Alexander, can't sleep. Keep rehearsing what to say tomorrow and everything sounds hollow. How do you apologize for destroying someone's life? Joshua typed back, you don't rehearse. You show up, you listen more than you talk, and you let them lead. This isn't your conversation to control. That terrifies me. Good. It should. See you tomorrow. Thank you for doing this. Joshua set his phone down and looked around his small living room. Tomorrow he would step into someone else's trauma, someone else's pain, and bear witness to a confrontation that might not have any resolution, any healing, any redemption. He would do it because he'd said he would, because Alexander needed a witness, because the Chens deserved to be heard. But underneath that, Joshua knew there was something else driving him. Some deep need to prove to himself that bearing witness mattered, that showing up for people in their hardest moments created something valuable in the world. That his small-scale life of presence and attention wasn't just a way of hiding from bigger challenges, but was actually the work that needed doing. Saturday morning, he would find out if that belief could survive contact with real complexity, real harm, real consequences that couldn't be fixed with breakfast and listening. Saturday morning arrived clear and cold, the kind of October day that felt like a warning of winter to come. Joshua picked up Alexander at 10:30 as planned, finding him waiting outside his downtown building in jeans and a simple jacket, looking like he hadn't slept. They drove in silence through Portland's neighborhoods, past coffee shops filling with weekend customers, past farmers markets setting up, past the ordinary machinery of normal life. The Chun house was in outer southeast Portland, a modest ranch-style home with a well-maintained garden now preparing for winter dormancy. Joshua parked on the street, and they both sat for a moment, neither moving to get out. "I can't do this," Alexander said quietly. "Yes, you can," Joshua replied, "because the alternative is worse. Running from this would destroy whatever chance you have at becoming someone different." They walked up the path together. Before they reached the door, it opened. Linda Chun stood there, a woman in her mid-60s with steel-gray hair pulled back, wearing a cardigan over a simple dress. Her face was weathered by more than time. Grief and stress had carved their own lines there. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, her voice neutral. "Thank you for coming." Her eyes shifted to Joshua. "And you are?" "Joshua Turner. I'm here as a witness. For both of you, if that's acceptable." Linda studied him for a moment, then nodded. "My husband Robert is inside. Please come in." The living room was filled with 30 years of life, photos on every surface, furniture that had been chosen for comfort rather than style, a bookshelf overflowing with medical texts and mystery novels. Robert Chun sat in a recliner by the window, an oxygen tank beside him. He was thin, diminished by illness, but his eyes were sharp and assessing as they entered. "Sit," Linda said, gesturing to the couch. She took a chair next to her husband, their hands finding each other automatically. United front. Alexander sat, Joshua beside him. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Alexander began, his voice rough. "I know. Let me speak first," Linda interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. "You'll have your turn. But we've been waiting 6 months to say this to your face." Alexander nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Linda took a breath. Chun Family Pharmaceuticals was started by my father-in-law in 1987. He came to this country with almost nothing and built something that mattered, not just a business but a service. We kept prices low because we remembered what it was like to struggle. We knew our customers by name. We attended their weddings, their funerals. We were part of a community. Her voice remained steady, but Joshua could see her grip tightening on Robert's hand. "When you targeted us, we tried to fight. We hired lawyers we couldn't afford. We worked 20-hour days trying to keep up with your price undercutting." Robert had his first heart attack at his desk at 2 in the morning, surrounded by legal documents. She looked at her husband, love and pain equally visible. The doctors said it was a miracle he survived. The stress literally broke his heart. Robert spoke now, his voice thin but clear. "We didn't just lose a business. We lost our identity, our purpose. I'm 70 years old. I should be working, mentoring our son, serving our community. Instead I'm here, too weak to walk to the mailbox, watching my wife work retail to pay legal debts that will outlive us both. Our son Daniel," Linda continued, "he had to move back in with us, a 40-year-old man, sleeping in his childhood bedroom, trying to figure out how to rebuild from nothing. He was engaged. His fiancée left. Couldn't handle the stress, the uncertainty, the shame of being associated with our failure." Her voice finally cracked. "You took everything from us. Our business, our health, our dignity, our son's future. And for what? A few percentage points of market share? Slightly better quarterly earnings." Alexander's face was wet with tears, but he didn't look away, didn't try to defend himself. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't pay our debts," Linda said. "Sorry doesn't give Robert back his health. Sorry doesn't undo 6 months of our son crying himself to sleep, feeling like he failed us. Sorry is just a word." "I know." Alexander's voice was barely audible. "You're right. Everything you're saying is right. I destroyed your lives for profit. For pride. For the emptiness I was trying to fill with success." He looked at them directly. "I can't fix this. I know that. But I'm trying to figure out how to stop being the person who could do this. How to use whatever power I have left to prevent this from happening to others." "That's something," Robert said quietly. "But it's not enough. Not for us." The silence that followed was profound. Joshua sat still, barely breathing, understanding that his role was simply to be present, to hold space for this necessary pain. "There's more you should know," Linda said, pulling out a folder. "We've been documenting everything. The patients who lost access to affordable medication, the emergency room visits, the diabetic complications. We've been gathering their stories with their permission to build a class action lawsuit. We have 47 families willing to testify about the harm your price increases caused. We're suing you, Mr. Beaumont, not for what you did to us specifically, but for the pattern of harm your business model has created." Alexander closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "You should. You absolutely should. I won't fight it. He stopped, seemed to make a decision. "I'll help. I'll provide internal documents, testimony, whatever you need. Even if it destroys my company. Especially if it destroys my company." Linda and Robert exchanged a glance, surprised. "Why would you do that?" Robert asked. "That's corporate suicide. Because my daughter died believing I would never choose people over profit," Alexander said, his voice breaking completely. "Because every day I do nothing, more people suffer. Because being sorry isn't enough. I need to make it mean something." He looked at Joshua, then back at the Chens. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to tear down what I built and help create something better." Linda studied him for a long moment. "I don't forgive you," she said finally. "I may never forgive you, but I believe you mean what you're saying. And if you're serious about helping us hold the industry accountable, we'll accept that help. Not because you've earned it, because the people still suffering deserve every weapon we can give them." They talked for another hour, discussing specifics, documents Alexander could provide, testimony he could offer, connections to other families harmed by pharmaceutical consolidation. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't redemption. But it was something real: acknowledgement, accountability, and the beginning of reparative action. As they prepared to leave, Daniel Chun emerged from a back room, a man with his parents' features but carrying the weight of recent trauma in every movement. He looked at Alexander with something harder than his parents' anger: contempt. "I hope destroying your company hurts," Daniel said quietly. "I hope you lose everything the way we did. I hope you know what it's like to start over with nothing but shame." "I hope so too," Alexander said, meeting his eyes. "I deserve that. I deserve worse." Daniel held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once and walked away. In the truck, driving back toward Alexander's downtown apartment, neither spoke for several minutes. Joshua could feel Alexander trembling beside him, processing everything. "Thank you," Alexander finally said, "for making me do that, for being there. How do you feel?" "Destroyed. Clearer. Terrified. Like I finally understand the actual cost of my choices." Alexander wiped his eyes. "And certain. I'm going to do what I said. I'm going to help them with their lawsuit, even if it means losing everything. I'm going to go public with what I know about industry practices. I'm going to—" He laughed, but it sounded healthier than before. "I'm going to become unemployed and probably unemployable. And that's exactly what needs to happen." Joshua pulled over into a parking lot, turning to face Alexander. "Before you do all that, I want you to understand something. This can't be about your redemption. It has to be about making things right for the people harmed. Your healing, your peace, that's secondary. Maybe you never get that. Can you live with that? I don't know, Alexander admitted. But I have to try. What's the alternative? Continue profiting from harm? That's not living. That's just existing in a moral coma. They sat in the truck, watching Saturday shoppers move through the parking lot, carrying bags, holding hands, living their small, important lives. I need to tell Maya about this, Joshua said suddenly. About what I've been doing with you. She deserves to know. Will she understand? I think so. She's wise like that. Joshua smiled. She'll probably ask me the same question I just asked you. Am I helping for the right reasons? Or am I trying to fix something in myself? And what's the answer? Both, Joshua said honestly. It's always both. We help others partly because we need to help ourselves. But that doesn't make the help less real. He started the truck again. Come to the center next Thursday. Keep showing up. Keep doing the small-scale work while you figure out the big-scale accountability. Both matter. I will, Alexander promised. And Joshua? When I lose my company, when I'm starting over, I'll need to find actual work. Real work. Do you think? Would the community center hire someone like me? For maintenance, equipment repair, whatever you need. Joshua thought about this. About Alexander Beaumont, former Billionaire CEO, working alongside the kids for minimum wage, fixing 3D printers and teaching soldering. About how far someone could fall and whether that fall might actually be the path upward. Ask me in 6 months, Joshua said. After you've proven you can keep showing up. Then we'll see. He dropped Alexander off and drove home through Portland's autumn afternoon. Maya was at a friend's house, wouldn't be back until evening. Joshua made himself coffee and sat on the couch, processing everything. His phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. The reporter from ProPublica just confirmed our interview for Tuesday. I'm telling them everything. Thank you for helping me find the courage. Joshua set his phone down and looked around his small apartment. The life he'd built from grief and choice and daily presence. He'd told Alexander that small scale wasn't the same as small impact. Now he wondered if the reverse was true too. That sometimes the biggest changes happen not through grand gestures but through the accumulated weight of witnesses who refused to look away. When Maya came home that evening, he told her everything about Alexander, the Chens, the choice to help someone face accountability. She listened carefully, then hugged him. I'm proud of you, Dad, she said, for seeing someone, even someone who didn't deserve it. Everyone deserves to be seen, Joshua replied, even at their worst. Maybe especially then. Outside, the Portland evening deepened into night. Inside, father and daughter made dinner together, talking about robotics and college applications and the ordinary architecture of their lives. Small scale, human scale, the only scale that ever really mattered. Thank you for listening to I Won't Judge You, a story about accountability, redemption, and the courage it takes to face the consequences of our choices. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more original fiction exploring the complexity of human nature and the possibility of change. Hit that like button to help others discover Joshua and Alexander's journey, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Do people deserve second chances? What does real accountability look like? We'd love to hear your perspective.